Incredible transformation. A single mother's amazing act saves a mafia boss. Shocking 200 men bow. Jessica rubbed her eyes as she walked out of the diner, fatigue clinging to her like the Brooklyn night mist. After a grueling shift, she struggled with the echo of laughter from her children bouncing in her mind. Tomorrow would be another day of balancing 3 jobs, ensuring that her kids had food and a warm home. The weight of responsibility hung heavy on her. Would she ever find a moment to breathe, to feel something other than exhaustion? At least, she thought, she could slip into her favorite cheap restaurant for a quick bite. As she entered, the warm air enveloped her, but the raucous energy was palpable. Conversations mixed with the sizzling sounds from the kitchen. Suddenly, her gaze flicked to the far end of the bar. Tony the Chair Marino, the infamous local mafia boss, sat surrounded by his entourage, every inch the notorious figure he was rumored to be. The whispers grew louder, tinged with fear and admiration as patrons respected his untouchable reputation. Jessica's instinct screamed to leave, avoid trouble, but the fight against her worries was immediate. Then it happened. In a matter of seconds, Tony grabbed his throat, panic smothering the room like a thick fog. It took her a moment to register what was happening, the horror stark against the backdrop of her mundane struggles. In that instant, she thought of her children, of the strength she needed to show for them. She dashed across the room, pushing all hesitation aside. This was life or death. She couldn't stand by. The moment she reached him, her hands moved instinctively, administering the Heimlich maneuver with a fierceness deeper than just survival. This was about defiance, dignity, proving that she wouldn't turn away. It took several desperate thrusts, but finally, an oyster shot from his mouth like a cannonball, landing onto the floor with a soft thud. The din faded, leaving only the sound of his heavy breaths. He looked up at her, eyes wide, but not in gratitude, perhaps curiosity. That's when Jessica's real fear solidified. What had she done? A single act of compassion against a mountain of danger. She stepped back, looking at the people around her. They stared, jaws hanging in disbelief. Did she just save Tony Marino? A man whose name echoed in the shadows, who traded more than money for loyalty. A wave of anxiety twisted her stomach. How would that one reckless moment affect her life and, most importantly, her children's lives? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The days that followed were laden with tension. Tony's attempts to repay her were generous, even intrusive. Money for her children's education, a life raft thrown in a stormy sea. But Jessica couldn't accept it. She felt her family's integrity becoming tainted with every dollar he offered. No amount of wealth could compensate for the risk she had unintentionally invited into their lives. But as she tried to cling to her values, shadows danced between loyalty and survival. Soon, whispers circulated about her, drawing unwanted attention. Rival factions had picked up on Tony's fragility. Jessica's anxiety swelled, her fears morphing into a constricting chain. The chaos of her life began to spiral. She could almost trace the threads connecting her to danger. Every clang of the bell at her restaurant job now resonated with impending doom. Then the message arrived, a chilling reminder that playing the hero had consequences. She had crossed a line, entangling herself in a world she could barely comprehend, and the stakes were now higher than ever. As the threat loomed closer, Jessica felt herself caught in the eye of a storm. Would her steadfast moral compass save her children, or had it sealed their fate? In the darkness of Brooklyn, a single choice spiraled into a hurricane of repercussions, pushing her toward a confrontation that felt inevitable. The tension sat heavy, cold, as the shadows closed in around her. Jessica sat at her small kitchen table, a half-eaten piece of toast in front of her, cold coffee cooling beside it. The sunlight streaming through the window felt like a taunt as her mind raced between the shadows that loomed larger with every passing day. The music of laughter from the living room faded into a haunting echo, and the warmth of her children's joy turned into a reminder of what was at stake. She had always prided herself on her ability to juggle chaos, but now chaos felt like a beast lurking, breathing down her neck. The phone rang, its harsh tone slicing through her thoughts. She hesitated, staring at the caller ID. Tony's name flashed across the screen, a bitter reminder of her heroic moment, the moment that had unwittingly impaired her family's security. She considered ignoring his call, but dread seeped in the feeling of losing control tightening around her. With a deep breath, she answered. "Hello?" "Jessica," Tony's voice rumbled, smooth yet commanding. "We need to talk." A wave of tension coursed through her as she closed her eyes. Talk was the last thing she wanted. "I'm busy," she replied, her tone cooler than intended. "But it's important. I won't take much of your time." "Important to you or to me?" she whispered, quieting the storms of conflict inside. His response was a heavy silence. In that moment, she faced a choice to remain tethered to her defense or to confront this disturbing new role she had been forced into. "I can offer you more than money," he finally said, his tone shifting, almost vulnerable. "I can teach you how to protect what matters to you." The proposition hung between them like a thick fog. The temptation to seek knowledge, to take back some power over her life, was intoxicating. A part of her recoiled. A woman with 3 jobs didn't need to dabble in the underworld, didn't need an assassin's code. The other part, however, fluttered with possibility. She could learn discernment, strategies to navigate threats. "Why would you want to help me?" she pressed, searching for the thread of sincerity. "Because you showed courage when no one else would," he replied, his voice steadying. "People like me owe a debt of honor. But beyond that, I see something in you." That something gnawed at her. What was he seeing? Strength or recklessness? The line blurred between admiration and manipulation. Could she renegotiate her narrative while woven into the fabric of his world? Suddenly, her children's laughter squealed from the living room, a beautiful distraction, reminding her who she truly was. Jessica sighed, wavering. The stakes were no longer just about her. Each choice echoed through their lives. Would she indelibly alter the path of danger? Or reinvigorate her strength through learning? "I need time to think," she offered, her voice barely a whisper. The last thing she wanted was to feel the pressure of a decision when, truthfully, she was running on empty. "Take your time, but remember, the clock ticks for everyone, even the courageous," Tony replied. The line clicked dead, leaving her shuddering in ambiguity. As the weight of silence engulfed her, she began planning her next move. If this was the path set before her, she needed to wield every thread to her advantage. Deciding to delve into Tony's world would mean facing the very essence of what she aimed to protect. For her children, she could not allow fear to mold her response. As the shadows stretched out, she resolved to confront the unknown with both courage and intent. But as she prepared to step deeper, a cold realization washed over her. What if the new armor she sought came at a price she wasn't ready to pay? The decision loomed as the past collided with an uncertain future, forcing her to tread a dangerous line. She glanced out at the twinkling streetlights, and in that moment, she felt both daring and vulnerable, knowing that confronting the darkness meant everything could change forever. What more would she have to sacrifice? Would there be a way to master this strain without losing herself entirely? With a knot twisting in her stomach, she resolved to meet Tony on his turf. The time had come to face the realities she had skirted around for too long. And as she opened the door to set forth, another thought struck. Would she mold her future, or would it mold her? The chill of the evening air bit at Jessica's skin as she stepped outside, her breath visible in the dim light. She had almost forgotten how to feel the world outside her 4 walls, a world filled with uncertainty yet alive with potential. Every step away from her home sent a pulse of both dread and exhilaration through her veins. Her heart raced as she approached the unmarked building Tony had indicated in their brief conversation. The street felt unfamiliar, the shadows seeming to flicker with the ghosts of choices yet made. For a woman who had mastered the art of balancing life, this was a gamble unlike any she had ever taken. Turning down a dimly lit alleyway, she surged forward as determination replaced her fleeting doubts. The prospect of gaining power over her circumstances drew her in like a moth to a flame, even while the heat of it raised the hairs on her neck. When she finally reached the door, she paused, releasing a shaky breath. She was about to step into a world that operated under rules far different from her own, a world where the stakes were life and death. The door opened, revealing a simple interior dimly lit by flickering lights. Tony was already inside, standing against a bar with a curated nonchalance that belied the tension in the air. His presence was magnetic yet unnerving. She sensed how effortlessly he commanded the room, something she had learned to emulate in her own chaotic life but never felt in the core of her being. "You decided to come," he said, a smirk playing on his lips. There was an underlying challenge in his tone, as if he sensed the turmoil swirling inside her. "I'm here to learn," she asserted, her voice firmer than she felt. The weight of her commitment settled like a soft lead blanket around her shoulders. "Learning takes courage," he observed, his gaze piercing. "But can you teach yourself to unlearn? That is where the real challenge lies." His words struck deep, forcing her to confront her habitual thinking. Every moment spent worrying about her children, about her safety, about the choices she made it served to protect her but also to bind her. She had wrapped herself in layers of caution that now felt suffocating. "Unlearn what?" she asked, genuinely perplexed. "Unlearn the fear that holds you back. Life isn't just about surviving, it's about seizing control of your narrative." His refrigerator-loud voice filled her with an urgency to act, echoing the lingering memories of her everyday confrontations with reality. "It sounds like you're preaching chaos theory to a mother with 3 kids, she replied, hidden vulnerabilities slipping through her sarcasm. "Or maybe it's the other way around," he countered smoothly, leaning in slightly. "You're afraid of the chaos in your life, and that is exactly where I come in." Jessica swallowed hard. His charismatic determination felt intoxicating, but she also sensed the danger coiled within like a riptide she could easily underestimate. Yet in his challenge simmered a flicker of hope, a chance to reclaim her sense of agency. "Fine," she said, steeling her resolve. "Teach me then." As he nodded, the thrum of neglect and responsibility started to dissolve. She could feel a new sense of identity being woven from the frayed edges of her former self. This was not merely about protecting her family anymore, it was about reshaping her ambition. Tony led her past the bar toward a dimly lit training room filled with various gears and paraphernalia. As he began to explain techniques that blurred the lines between defense and offense, she found herself enveloped in the urgency to learn, to be molded by the intensity of their new reality. But with every revelation came more questions. What limits would she have to break? How far could she transform without losing her core? Just as she was starting to grasp the first concepts, Tony's expression shifted. "We're not the only ones with our eyes on you, Jessica. You have no idea how quickly this will escalate." An unseen ripple of fear coursed through her. What implications lay ahead, and what kind of conflicts would she face? The thrill told her to keep going, while an instinct warned her to tread carefully. Jessica gazed into his eyes, searching for clarity amid the chaos. The decision was transforming her, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she had already crossed a bridge toward an uncertain future rife with looming shadows. But she pressed on anyway, driven more than ever by the desire to seize control. "What's next?" she asked, her voice steady now. Tony smiled, a mixture of intrigue and anticipation in his gaze. "Now, we prepare to dive deeper. Are you ready for what that truly means?" As those words hung heavy in the air, an unsettling thought gripped her. The real battle was just beginning, and she had yet to understand the forces she would face. Would she embrace this wild twist in her life, or would she find herself trapped a pawn in a game much larger than she could comprehend? The dim light of the training room cast long shadows as Jessica stood ready, heart pounding, with a mix of nerves and anticipation swirling just beneath the surface. Tony's presence felt pervasive, as if the air around him vibrated with energy. She had crossed a threshold, and now she stood on the brink of something monumental, though the depths of her journey were shrouded in uncertainty. "Step 1, Tony said, his tone shifting to one of command. is to learn how to fall. Fall? The question slipped out before she could control it. A bemused smile flickered on her lips, masking the genuine apprehension beneath. Yes. Falling is not a failure, it's an integral part of the process. If you're going to navigate chaos, you need to know how to pick yourself up. He gestured toward the padded mats that covered the floor, a makeshift cushion for what felt like an odd lesson. With a brave nod, Jessica stepped forward and faced the first challenge, a simple roll. It was a quick lesson in vulnerability. As she gently allowed herself to tumble forward, the world inverted for a moment. She was both terrified and liberated. The fall stripped away unnecessary pretenses, leaving only her raw determination. When she stood again, the flush of embarrassment lingered, but along with it came an exhilarating rush. That didn't hurt as much as I thought it would, Jessica admitted, half laughing, half breathing relief. Right. Now, every time you fall, you absorb that shock, the fear, the shame, and you use it to make your next rise even stronger. We'll layer on more as we go, Tony said, his words punctuating both the weight of her new commitment and the flickering fear of the unknown. Each drill fed a deep yearning within her, the desire to not only reclaim her life but to redefine it entirely. As the hours passed, Jessica continuously challenged herself, falling, rolling, and rising again. The bruises that began to form were testaments to her effort but also reminders of the discomfort that accompanied true transformation. As she was catching her breath after another rigorous set, Tony approached with a different expression, one of thoughtful intensity. You have potential, Jessica. But there's also an undercurrent of hesitation. You need to confront not just the physical challenge but the mental barriers that remain. What do you mean? She asked, genuine curiosity igniting the remnants of her earlier fear. How far are you willing to go to break those bindings? This isn't just about mastering skills, it's about redefining who you are. Can you strip away the layers of what you think you have to be? His question pierced through her, unearthing fears deeply embedded in her psyche. The little girl who had worried her entire life about not being enough, who had nurtured the ideal mother image, felt the tide of panic rise within her. What if the chaos that she had feared was simply her unrealized self, waiting to emerge? Can you operate outside those roles? His voice was low, almost conspiratorial. There was pressure in his gaze. Jessica shifted her weight, internalizing the challenge. I don't know if I can let go of that control, Tony. My role has always been my anchor. Good, he replied, smirking almost cockily. Because that anchor is weighing you down. What if you embraced the unknown instead? What if you became the storm? With those words, her perspective shifted. The clouds of her previous life, her responsibilities and fears seemed less oppressive. Instead of feeling trapped, she felt as if a new door had swung open, revealing possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine. For the first time in a long while, she felt the rush of control igniting her spirit. I want to try, she uttered, surprising herself with newfound clarity. We'll work on it. But remember this, embracing chaos doesn't mean sacrificing who you are, rather, it's about enhancing who you can become. The path ahead will demand courage, especially when the storm hits. Just as they prepared to continue, a sharp ringing echoed from Tony's phone. He glanced at the screen, his smile vanishing like a wisp of smoke. The sudden shift in his demeanor hinted at impending chaos. I have to take this. Don't move. With those words, an uneasy silence enveloped her. Jessica's heart raced as she watched him step away, uncertainty creeping back in. What lay ahead? Were they truly prepared for what was coming? In that moment, determination surged anew within her, igniting every corner of her being. She understood the risks, the magnitude of what was unfolding. But with each choice to confront the chaos nested inside her, she edged ever closer to an irreversible transformation. As she waited for Tony to return, she could feel the weight of something monumental lurking out there, beyond the training room walls. She was ready to push her limits, and she understood that the most significant battle was still ahead. Where would the storm lead her? Would she emerge shaped by it, or would she be consumed? The only certainty was that the storm had begun to brew, and she was at the eye of it. The silence in the training room buzzed in her ears, igniting a flicker of anxiety. Tony's absence weighed heavily, a reminder that the next challenge was imminent. As the seconds ticked by, Jessica's mind raced with possibilities and doubts. What if stepping into the storm meant confronting something she couldn't handle? Realizing that this journey was about more than just physical prowess, she began to mentally prepare for the unpredictability ahead. She transitioned into a sequence of deep breaths, grounding herself in the here and now. Each inhalation filled her with determination, while each exhalation released the trepidation that clung so tightly. In those moments of solitude, Jessica reflected on Tony's words. Could she strip away the layers, redefining not only her abilities but also her identity? The little girl inside her, clutching onto fear, began to grow silent as the empowered version of herself sparked to life. As a call came from the back office, the door swung open and Tony returned, his expression a tumultuous mix of urgency and concern. "Sorry about that," he said, shaking off the immediate effects of what had been clearly an important conversation. "We'll have to adjust today's training. I got some details that may affect us both." With a mixture of adrenaline and curiosity, Jessica leaned in, eager yet anxious to hear how this could pivot her trajectory. "What happened?" "There are changes happening within the organization I work with. Some chaotic shifts are inevitable, and I need to prepare. This might impact our sessions." His gaze softened as he continued, "But it's vital that you stay focused. If anything, this could be an opportunity for you to grow." Her heartbeat quickened. What would those changes mean for her journey? Would distractions undermine her newfound commitment to embrace chaos? "What do you suggest?" she managed to ask, pushing through her unease. "Embrace the unpredictability. Make each practice session a reflection of your goals, not just a reiteration of skills. I want to push you further into discomfort so that you not only learn to fall but to rise stronger than before." Jessica felt the wheels of determination begin to turn again. "I can do that. I want to confront what is coming, not only to prepare but to amplify everything I've learned." "Great," he said, a glimmer of approval in his eyes. "Then let us improvise. From now on, I want you to set the pace. Challenge me. Let us simulate real-world chaos." She could already feel the adrenaline surging, igniting an instinct that had been dormant. This was her moment to take charge. "Okay, what do you want me to do?" "Start with your fears. Face them head-on. Think about the roles you've clung to. Can you channel that energy, transform the hesitations into motivation?" Jessica's thoughts collided. She could feel familiar fears rising, but instead of retreating, she breathed into the discomfort. She envisioned her current anchor's mother, employee, and caretaker and questioned which ones served her now and which ones were chains holding her back. "I can confront these roles. I can redefine who I am by merging my past with my evolving self," she declared, her voice resonating with newfound strength. "Perfect," Tony said, excitement glinting in his eyes. "Let us begin with a physical manifestation of this progression. Show me your will as you confront each boundary. Fall hard and rise harder." The energy shifted as they moved, the space static with anticipation, each movement charged with purpose. Jessica dove into a series of drills, executing them with a focus that she didn't know she possessed. With every fall, she envisioned the burdens dissolving, and with every rise, a piece of her emerged unscathed. In the midst of this physical trial, something inside her clicked. The prospect of chaos no longer frightened her, it exhilarated her. The storm didn't just represent upheaval, it represented the chance to forge a new identity, one that broke from the past's confines. As she wrapped up the session, gasping for air, the exhilaration coursed through her veins. This experience solidified her resolve to thrive, to emerge as that storm Tony envisioned. But just as she began to process her achievements, Tony's phone rang mercilessly again, pulling his attention. He stepped back to take the call, a furrow forming in his brow, a signal that the brewing chaos in his life was intensifying even further. Little did Jessica know, with every defiance of her physical and mental boundaries, new conflicts were drawing closer, waiting to intersect with her burgeoning journey. Would her transformation render her stronger amidst chaos, Or would it unfurl into something unmanageable? As she stood poised, a kernel of determination igniting within her, Jessica realized that the storm wasn't merely a metaphor, it was a reality waiting to be confronted. And whatever came next, she was ready to embrace it. Jessica's heart raced beneath her ribcage, a reminder of how far she'd pushed herself in that small, intensity-filled training room. With the final drills behind her, she felt the high tide of adrenaline recede, replaced by a deep wave of exhaustion mixed with triumph. This chaotic storm she had begun to embrace felt like a baptism of fire, cleansing her of past hesitations and redefining her present self. Tony returned from his phone call, the taut lines of stress still marring his forehead. "Listen," he began, knowing that the urgency of his earlier conversation wasn't subsiding. "It's essential we adjust our approach to training moving forward. Are you ready to dive even deeper?" She nodded, the gravity of his words sinking in. The lingering effects of the earlier session flooded her with a clarity she hadn't anticipated. "I'm ready. Whatever I need to do, I'll do it. The chaos that's coming, it's almost like a force I must reckon with, not shy away from." "Exactly," he affirmed, pacing the floor as he immersed himself in thought. "We need to simulate real pressure, which will demand more variation and more creativity from you. Think on your feet, adapt. You won't always have me there in a real conflict." Jessica nodded, internalizing his advice with fervor. She was beginning to realize that this journey wasn't merely physical, it was an awakening of her mind and spirit. Each technique she executed wasn't solely about speed or strength but about composing a symphony of strategic thought melded with instinct. "Let us work on your quick decision-making," Tony continued, breaking her reverie. "I'll present scenarios, and you'll have to adapt, strategize your way through them." With a sense of foreboding mixed with excitement, Jessica braced herself. She envisioned obstacles manifesting as chains that had both held her down and had the potential to spark her liberation. "Okay, give me your scenario," she replied, her confidence beginning to crystallize. Tony's eyes gleamed with a challenge. "Imagine you're in a crowded space, like a cafe. Something goes wrong, a sudden encounter, confrontation. You feel eyes on you. What do you do?" Jessica paused, her mind racing through the myriad of choices. Adrenaline surged again, and she felt a palpable urgency to respond. "Use the environment to my advantage. Draw attention away from me if it escalates. Isolate the aggressor." "Good, now make it physical," he commanded, shifting his own stance to a striking position. Jessica leapt into action, channeling her thoughts into an intricate dance of movement. She executed a swift series of feints, using mental cues to guide her body. She was consciously tapping into the fear she previously harbored, turning it into an empowering fuel. Suddenly, Tony expected an attack, an unanticipated shove toward her. Instinct took over as she pivoted, redirecting the energy, her body transforming the perceived threat into a demonstration of strength. She countered, shifting gears effortlessly. In that moment, she realized how seamlessly her physical and mental were intertwining. "Excellent," Tony praised, his approval filling the air. "But remember, it's not just about the physicality. You have to articulate your thought process. Own it." A wave of realization hit her, a confession she hadn't voiced until now. "I'd been apologizing for being me for so long," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could second-guess herself. "I felt like I had to adjust to everyone around me, often losing parts of myself in the process." "Stop right there," he interrupted, an intense gaze locking onto hers. "This is exactly why we're here, Jessica. Real growth happens when you embrace your authentic self, flaws and all. The storm outside doesn't diminish your light, it reveals it." In that charged moment, she understood the role of her past not as shackles but as detailed maps leading her through the fractures of her identity. The storm wasn't just chaos, it was revelations waiting to unfold. As they wrapped up another intense round of drills, Jessica felt a new layer emerging within her, an internal strength she could build upon even amidst growing uncertainties. Tony's words resonated deeper with each passing session, pressing her to confront both internal conflicts and external realities. She was ready to unearth not only the warrior within but the leader she was destined to become. Yet, as her mind wandered to the future, a lurking apprehension gnawed at her. The chaos Tony spoke of was no longer a distant concept, it was encroaching quickly, and the weight of it pressed down on her like an impending storm. Would her evolving strength hold steadfast when real conflict emerged? Just then, Tony's phone buzzed again, intensifying the tension in the air. "Stay close," he urged, his voice low. "We might need to pivot again, something's brewing." With each beat of her heart, she understood, the moment of confrontation was drawing imminent. How would she rise to the occasion when reality revealed its true face? Jessica felt her heart quicken as she processed Tony's words. The buzzing of his phone faded into the background, a white noise carved out by waves of concern flaring within her. Uncertainty and anticipation mingled, creating a spiral that reflected the chaotic energy of everything she had been feeling lately. "What's brewing?" she asked, her voice steadying despite the tension tightening around her. She was ready for whatever this new development might entail, determined not to flinch at a challenge. Tony took a deep breath, a moment of measured contemplation passing between them. "There's been rumors of a gathering, something unsavory is on the horizon. These aren't just simple conflicts. They involve people who are dangerous, skilled in manipulation and violence. Understanding how to navigate through this world will be crucial." The weight of that knowledge settled over Jessica like a heavy cloak. She could feel the grasp of her past choices surfacing again, clawing for a moment of vulnerability. But the blade she had sharpened through training had already begun to reshape her. She wouldn't allow these old fears to dictate her anymore. "Let's prepare then," she stated, her voice laced with determination. "What's our next move? Let's simulate high-stakes scenarios. You need to be adaptive not just to physical encounters but to the psychological battlefield," Tony explained as he began to pace again, his eyes narrowing with focus. "I want you to step into the mindset of those who would confront you. Learn their motivations, their tactics. Empathy, in this case, is a tool for survival." Jessica felt a pulse of enthusiasm surging up within her. As Tony outlined various tactics to simulate confrontations, she started to consider more than just self-defense techniques. She would learn to view the world through a multifaceted lens, analyzing motivations, pressures, and fears. "All right," she said, determination solidifying in her focus. "Let's do some role-playing. Give me a scenario." Tony grinned, a mix of admiration and challenge shining in his eyes. "You're at a club filled with rival factions. A figure approaches you, he's confident, assertive. He's sizing you up. How do you assert your place? Do you fight? Negotiate? Or prepare an escape route?" The sudden scenario ignited something primal in Jessica. Each strategic consideration colliding in her mind, her heart raced not with fear but with a potent sense of purpose. "I want to negotiate. Analyzing their motivations will give me leverage," she replied, crafting each word carefully. "But if it escalates, I want to be prepared, ready to draw on what I've learned." Tony nodded, clearly impressed. "That's the spirit. Let's delve into the dialogue, practice the intention behind those words. You need to read the room." She took a breath, diving into the role-play with a fervor that surprised even her. The club environment came alive in her mind, each sound, each glimmer of light, the intricacies of power dynamics. She felt the pulse of the simulated crowd vibrating through her, urging her to engage, to react quickly. As they navigated the exchange, Jessica sensed her confidence growing. Words flowed easily, but more than that, she began to intuit his intentions. Whenever she met resistance, she practiced redirecting and reframing her perspective. It felt electric, empowering and unveiling of layers she had never allowed herself to touch. But the exercise was cut short. Tony's phone buzzed again, pulling him back into urgency. "All right, we need to pause. That was a tip from one of my contacts. It's happening sooner than anticipated. We're on a countdown." An unsettling shiver crept through Jessica. The clarity of her newfound skills collided against the raw reality of potential danger. Was she ready? Jessica, Tony said, his voice steady, this isn't just about preparation. It's about embracing who you are becoming. You are growing, but you must trust that growth to lead you through. She met his gaze, a blend of doubt and fierce determination battling within her. She realized the thunderous storm of conflict wasn't simply external, it was brewing within her too. In that very moment, time stretched. As the shadows of the unknown loomed larger, she had to confront not only the physical readiness but her emotional resilience. Can I really embrace this part of me? She wondered aloud, the question both daunting and exhilarating. You can, Tony assured her, the fire in his eyes unwavering. But now, it's time to face what you fear most. Your true test begins now. Jessica tightened her jaw, her resolve solidifying into a shield. What awaited her just beyond the veil of her comfort zone felt simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. They were stepping into the unknown together, but she knew she was no longer alone in her transformation. But just as she prepared to tackle this imminent challenge, a deep, instinctual knowing struck her. What if the storm within wasn't just her starting point but her greatest ally? And with that thought hanging heavily in the air, Jessica steeled herself for the unpredictable unfolding of events that awaited. The next move could change everything she had worked for, every lesson she had learned, and every piece of her newfound self that she would need to draw upon. What if I become something unexpected? She mused as the shadows coalesced around them, challenging her to confront the pulsating heart of the chaos that awaited. Would she rise against it or let it consume her? The air crackled with an electric pulse as Jessica faced Tony, her heart hammering in anticipation. The shadows cast by their urgency loomed larger, but instead of retreating, they summoned her. It was time, she was unearthing layers she never knew she possessed. Let us get started, she declared, casting aside the hesitation that crept in on the edges of her resolution. Setting up a more realistic scenario took on a fierce urgency. They transitioned from the confines of their training space to a makeshift version of the club from their earlier role-playing. The lights dimmed, and the atmosphere thickened with tension, mirroring the heaviness that hung above them. This time, the stakes were intensified. She needed to be valid in her judgments, visible in her choices. Tony leaned against a wall, embodying the figure from her prior scenario. His posture was assertive, the adrenaline of anticipation radiating off him. You're in the club. The crowd hums with anticipation. Someone approaches you, someone powerful. He's here to size you up, see if you're worth the risk. What will it be this time? Taking a steadying breath, Jessica recalled her training, the feeling of the empowered words rolling off her tongue. I will greet him with confidence. No submissive tone, no doubt. I'll mirror his energy, watch for any sign of threat while remaining approachable. The moment she stepped into the imagined space, she became a conduit for everything she had learned. The familiar blend of fear and excitement propelled her forward as she faced Tony, her earlier apprehensions morphing into audacity. Evening, she said, exuding an air of casual authority, her voice steady as if they were the only two individuals existing in the room filled with noise. What brings you here? As Tony shrugged into character, matching her tone with one of incredulity laced with curiosity, she could sense the shift in dynamics. His confidence was pierced with intrigue, and for an instant, it felt as though the roles had reversed. The power was shifting, not entirely in his favor. Just checking the pulse of the room. You seem different, he replied, mirroring her nuances, examining her closely. Jessica leaned in, narrowing the distance between them. Different can be good or bad. Makes one wonder what you're really after. Each calculated phrase sharpened her clarity. She was not merely participating but dynamically participating. This wasn't just a game, it was life, and she was already laying the groundwork for her own narrative. Bold. He retorted, the air thickening with a challenge. But do you truly think you understand the risks involved? That question was her cue. She had faced risks head-on before but never quite like this. Instead of retreating into uncertainty, she plowed forward, leaning into the challenge. I understand that every risk hides an opportunity, and that opportunity can rewrite the rules of engagement. With that, something shifted deeply within her. Empowerment surged through Jessica like wild currents of electricity. She was no longer merely responding to threats, she was embracing them, maneuvering them to her advantage. Underneath her calm exterior, nuanced thoughts collided. Every doubt had transformed into a fuel for growth. Tony, visibly impressed, broke character briefly. "You've evolved," he said, a hint of pride evident in his voice. "Your readiness isn't just about surviving. It's about adapting, thriving in chaos. You're not just functional now, you're formidable." The genuine acknowledgement ignited Jessica's ambition. The fire in her belly clawed to be unleashed. She had spent years preparing, internalizing lessons, but now she found herself at a precipice. What had begun as simple preparations had evolved into an existential declaration: she could be a catalyst for change. As they prepared to transition to a new scenario, something unexpectedly clicked within her, a realization that this inner transformation wasn't merely about facing the looming dangers outside, it was about mastering the labyrinth within. What if I can weaponize my fear? She wondered aloud, her voice laced with determination. Tony's eyes glinted with recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the fierce understanding crystallizing in her. "That is precisely the question, Jessica. You're tapping into something powerful. But now, you must confront what lies ahead and embody that self we've begun to cultivate." She nodded, every heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of her resolve. It was one thing to step into the world outside, it was another to harness her newfound strength against an undefined future. "Let's push further," she urged, feeling the weight of potential tension shimmering in the air. "If I can recognize and master my fear, then what else can I overcome?" As she readied herself to delve deeper into this uncharted territory, a looming uncertainty gnawed at her resolve. Just how far could she push before she stumbled? In that moment of contemplation, a realization washed over her: true strength lay not in overcoming fear but in embracing and integrating it. The next challenge could very well be a reflection of her greatest internal conflicts. Tomorrow brought a new training session, but it also erupted with the promise of confrontation. The dark tide surged forward, the challenge awaited. But could she harness this evolution into a formidable reality? The echoes of her ambitions reverberated through her thoughts, ushering in a new dawn of potential. As the unsettling thought lingered, she clung to the hope that perhaps the storm within was more than just predictive chaos, it was her robust ally, and she was ready to meet whatever came next. The following day dawned with an unsettling promise, a reminder of the trials that lay ahead. Jessica could almost taste the anxiety on her tongue, the sweet and bitter mixture of anticipation and trepidation. As she arrived at the training space, she felt the walls closing in, the weight of past encounters clamoring for attention. Yet, buried beneath it all was a fledgling flame, growing brighter with each passing moment. Tony greeted her with a nod, his confidence palpable. "Ready for today's challenge?" he asked, his tone somewhere between teasing and serious. "Let's do this," she responded, her voice firmer than she felt. The prospect of confronting her fears sent a powerful surge through her, a reminder that she was no longer simply a spectator in her own life. "Today, we're pushing boundaries," Tony said as they prepared for another scenario, but the glint in his eyes suggested he had something more for her. He outlined the setting, a dimly lit bar where tension was thicker than the smoke in the air. A gang of formidable figures lingered, each one exuding a dangerous charisma. Jessica's heart raced. "You're not just engaging, you're asserting your presence. You must command respect amidst fear," Tony instructed, shifting seamlessly into the role of an intimidating figure. The bar's atmosphere felt electric as Jessica stepped into the role, her thoughts accelerating. "This is your territory, but I'm not here to cower. I'm here to prove my worth." With each word, she could feel the incipient power swirling within her. The earlier self-doubt began to dissolve, replaced by a foundation of confidence. As she faced the mock adversaries, she absorbed their energy, using it as a springboard rather than a weight. Tony leaned back against the bar, embodying his character with effortless poise. "You think you can handle the heat? What makes you believe you stand a chance here?" The challenge from him echoed, mingling with the roar of her internal battles. "Underestimating me is your first mistake," she countered, her voice steady, each word chosen deliberately to disarm the typical narrative of fear. What lies beneath courage is not a fear of failure but a hunger to thrive, and I am here to thrive." The words hung in the air, igniting an internal shift. Recognition washed over her, a clarity that resonated beyond the confines of her training. For the first time, she realized that the vulnerabilities she had once deemed weaknesses were now the driving forces behind her emergence. "Good," Tony replied, visibly impressed. "But let us escalate this. You've just walked into a place where stakes are high, and trust is fickle. You're not just proving yourself to them, but to yourself." Steeling herself, she embraced his provocation. "Then let us raise the stakes," she replied. "I'm ready to face whatever comes next, even if that means risking everything." As they transitioned into deeper exchanges, Jessica felt an unfamiliar intensity rise within her. Each response had to be sharper, more calculated, as though she were dismantling layers of armor to reveal her core. Yet as she navigated the facades, a flicker of doubt pricked at her consciousness. Could she truly maintain this persona amidst real danger? The gravity of her new convictions threatened to pull her under. A sudden thought gripped her: was she more afraid of failing or of succeeding? A realization unfurled within her, a spiral of potential, leading both to mastery and vulnerability. The knowledge was liberating, even intoxicating. She found power in the acceptance of her multifaceted self. Embrace the doubts, she told herself quietly, her resolve igniting anew. Let them inform your strategy, not dictate it. Reflective determination coursed through her veins. Jessica would not merely survive, she would thrive. As their session drew to a close, she could already envision how this iteration of herself might engage with the complexities of the outside world. The lessons were spilling into her mind, reshaping her perceptions of risk and conflict. But looming ahead was the question: could she hold this evolution when faced with the true reality of conflict? The weight of her internal struggle felt tangible. With a final poised glance in Tony's direction, she felt the heartbeat of possibility reverberating through her. "What's next, Tony?" she challenged, knowing he held the answers to her unspoken fears. "Tomorrow, we confront reality," he replied, a knowing smile betraying the complexity of the journey ahead. "This will be a test of everything we've built. Are you ready for what's to come?" Uncertainty wrapped around her like a veil. Still, under it, a growing steadiness fueled her resolve. The moment of truth was approaching, an intersection of her personal evolution and the world's unpredictable rhythm. As she mentally prepared, she felt the ground shift beneath her. Was she ready to face the hardest challenge yet, one that would test every lesson she had internalized? With tomorrow on the horizon, the echo of her own strength lingered in the balance. Jessica stood poised with her heart pounding in anticipation of the imminent confrontation. The air was thick with uncertainty, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her transformation tangible between her ribs. The vast world outside called to her, an unmistakable reminder of every difficult choice that had led her here. Tomorrow was not just another day, it was the culmination of her journey through chaos and fear, a reckoning with herself and the shadows of her past. As the evening descended, Jessica found herself reflecting on all the training, the emotional unraveling, and the self-discovery that had taken place. Each day had unveiled a piece of her she had long buried beneath layers of responsibility and caution. No longer was she tethered solely to the roles society imposed upon her. She felt herself birthing an entirely new presence, assertive and ready to face life not just as a mother struggling to survive, but as a woman with a fierce voice and undeniable power. When she met Tony for their final training session before the anticipated chaos, an electric current crackled between them. "This is it," Tony stated simply, as though the weight of their shared journey settled over his words. "You understand the stakes?" "I do," Jessica replied, steadying her breath. "It's about not just surviving, it's about thriving. I'm ready to confront what lies ahead, to embody everything you've taught me." As they began the preparation, they simulated encounters that felt all too real. Each drill propelled her deeper into understanding not merely of self-defense techniques but of navigating the complexities of human behavior. She recognized that survival in this male-dominated world wasn't about aggression, it was about intellect, emotional intelligence, and understanding the nuances that dictated each interaction. Good, Tony commended as Jessica executed a particularly complex maneuver that combined physical agility with mental acuity. You're no longer just responding to the environment, you're mastering it. Keep that mindset. With every encounter, she stripped away the latent fears within her, the whispers of inadequacy that once plagued her. I'm more than the roles expected of me, she affirmed during a particularly challenging exercise. Every lesson counts, every choice defines me. The practice culminated in a rigorous assessment where Tony prompted her with scenarios that pulled at her instincts and intellectual depth. In one scenario, he became a rival seeking to undermine her position, his tone dripping with condescension. Jessica met him head-on, her confidence unwavering. Underestimate me again, she challenged, and you'll learn that standing in my way is a grave miscalculation. Surprise flickered across Tony's face, a calculated assessment of her evolving strength. That's the spirit. Embrace your assertiveness. Confidence is your greatest asset. As dusk fell, Jessica felt transformed, wrapped in an aura that encapsulated her journey. She had faced her past, understood her escalating fears, and learned how to wield them as tools of empowerment. This was not merely a chapter in her life, this was her declaration of independence from the shackles of her former self. Tomorrow, you'll have your chance, Tony said, his voice tinged with gravity. Follow through, and commit to the person you've become. In that pivotal moment, Jessica understood her ultimate goal. It wasn't just about traversing the rough waters ahead. It was about stepping into the storm with her head held high, knowing she had wielded her power, defined her narrative, and embraced the chaos without succumbing to it. That night, sleepless and anxious, Jessica lay in bed, thoughts spiraling but anchored by newfound determination. The impending confrontation would be a test of everything she had learned, a crucible that would either forge her anew or unravel her foundation. She thought of her children, whose laughter had once been the pinnacle of her despair, and now inspired her rise. She was doing this for them as much as for herself. No longer would she be defined by fear. She'd emerge victorious, proving to herself that she could conquer the storms of life. The morning arrived with the weight of anticipation pressing upon her spirit. It was time. Jessica stepped into the new day, her resolve firm, ready to transform adversity into strength. As she ascended to the situation she had worked tirelessly to prepare for, every lesson flashed through her mind like a beacon of hope, a reminder that she was not just a survivor but an architect of her destiny. She inhaled deeply, unapologetically stepping into the chaos. With clarity and intent, she would activate her newfound confidence and strength. Today was the day she would finally claim her narrative, proving that the storm within her was not solely destructive but a wellspring of power waiting to be unleashed. From that moment on, Jessica transformed her fear into fuel. She would face the world on her own terms. She was ready not just for survival but for triumphant reclamation of her identity. Jessica was more than a mother now, she was a force to be reckoned with. The power of her transformation propelled her forward, ready to conquer whatever challenge awaited, liberated and fiercely alive in her newfound self-awareness. After this life-changing conclusion, it's time for you to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to support this channel without waiting even one more second. True fans of personal overcoming stories know how crucial your engagement is.